Hello, welcome to the Inside the Birds NFL Week 11 preview show. I'm Geoff Mosher, and Week 11 obviously got off to a rousing start as the Eagles and Commanders went on display for the first place in the NFC East at stake on Thursday night. The game definitely turned in the second half in favor of the Eagles, who really, and I don't know how many people, myself included, expected to say 10 weeks into the season that the Eagles defense has carried for certain stretches the Eagles offense as the offense really tries to find its identity. There's no question Saquon Barkley is an MVP candidate. He has been fantastic. But in general, the Eagles offense, and even against Washington when Barkley really didn't have much going for the first three quarters, in general, the Eagles offense has been inconsistent but explosive. And if you don't score points against the Eagles, you're not going to win. And you saw Washington struggle after that first touchdown to really get anything going. You credit the Eagles defense for that. Washington made mistakes, couldn't get the ball in the end zone, tried to go for it on a fourth down when they had some momentum. They didn't get it, and that just crushed them. And all the good things Washington did defensively to bottle up Hurts to early, to bottle up Saquon early, went down the drain because they couldn't score. And eventually, the Eagles are going to get their big play offense going, and they did. Sometimes it's the pass to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. Sometimes it's the run with Saquon. Sometimes it's both. And that's what makes the Eagles right now at 8-2 a dangerous team. They have put the NFC on notice after that 2-2 start and that really rough start, both offensively and defensively. They have put the NFC on notice. They are a legit team. They can hang with anyone. They can beat anyone, despite some of their flaws. They are going to be very, very difficult to stop. But if we're being fair, you can say all these things about the one team that they're really chasing right now for the number one seed, and that's the Lions. The Lions are as complete as the Eagles are. They may not have pound for pound the same amount of star power as the Eagles do. I mean, St. Brown's a great player. Laporta's a great player. Goff has been a good quarterback. You know, their running backs are really good. But if you pound for pound compare that to Saquon, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, you might say the Eagles have a better offensive cast, but the Lions are a better 53 right now, and they have a great offensive line. They're 8-1, and they get a layup this week against the Jaguars. So they should be 9-1. So the big question here is, can the Eagles somehow make up this one game or get ahead of the Lions for the number one seed? Can the Eagles get the bye like they did 2 years ago? And the easiest path you can get to the Super Bowl, the bye, the home field advantage. Can they get all that over the Lions, who have been the most complete and most dominant team in the NFL, or at least in the NFC? I can't take away from the Chiefs, but even the Chiefs seem to win a close one week after week after week, as you know, it feels like they made a deal with the devil the way they won last week. But the Lions have just dominated a lot of teams, including the Packers, who they beat by 10. And then, as we'll get into later in the show, you know, they turned the ball over 5 times against the Texans and still beat the Texans. So the Lions have shown you they're resilient, they're talented, they're battle tested, they're tough, and they're certainly on a mission from last year. And you like the fact that they didn't let last year's loss in the NFC Championship game kind of haunt them and carry that into the year. They came out on fire, ready to go. And so they'll probably be 9-1. And now you look and you say, is there any chance? What is the best chance the Eagles have here over the next 4 to 5 weeks to try to get one on the Lions? All right. Or just till the end of the year. The Lions have a fairly easy schedule for the next few weeks in that they play the Jaguars this week, the Colts next week, and the Bears. All right. So there's a good shot that they'll be 11-1. Okay. Good shot on that. I would bet, if you're a betting person, you'd probably bet on the Lions to be 11-1. You can, those aren't, not, no one's a give me, but the way the Lions are playing, they're the better team. They'll be favorites in all those games. But The Lions still have to play another game against the Packers, week 14. They still have to play the Bills right after week 15, and they'll have the 49ers week 17 and then finish up the final week against the Vikings. So you got two tough division games against two tough teams, Packers and Vikings. You have a tough game against the Bills, who have been very good. And I think the Niners, and we'll talk about this more, are going to hit their stride here over the second half with C-Mac back. So those are four tough games. So if you're the Eagles, you're looking at this Lions schedule and saying, can the Lions lose two of them, right? Assuming that they're going to be, uh, you know, 11-1, can they then lose two of those games? Can they finish the year 14-3? And if you're the Eagles, can you yourself get to 14-3 or 15-2, and win a tiebreaker? The Eagles still have to play the Steelers, the Ravens, the Rams. Yep. Rams is the next game, Sunday night. So you got Rams, Steelers, Ravens, and they'll have to play Washington again. Those are their four toughest opponents left. So if you can get the Lions to lose two of those games I mentioned, and if the Eagles can win those four games that I mentioned, that would be the way to do it. Now, that's a tough ask. It's tough to ask the Eagles to beat the Steelers, the Ravens, the Rams, and the Commanders in Washington again, and then not slip up against the Panthers or the Cowboys. But I'm assuming the Lions are going to win their layup game, so I'll assume the Eagles win their layup game. So it really comes down to these four games for each team, and it feels like the Eagles would have to go at least 3-1 in that stretch, and you need the Lions to go 2-2 in that stretch. Now, a tie at 14-3, perhaps, would probably favor the Lions, because right now the Lions have a one-game lead in the conference opponent. I believe that's the tiebreaker once you get to if there's no head-to-head, which the Eagles and Lions will not play each other this year in the regular season, so there won't be a head-to-head. So in the conference schedule, the Lions right now have a one-game lead. And one of those games that you're hoping, if you're an Eagles fan, that the Lions lose to gain that game advantage would be the Bills. So that wouldn't help them as much. And beating the Steelers and beating the Ravens wouldn't help the Eagles as much in that tiebreaker scenario, because those aren't conference games. So it's about beating the Rams. It's about beating the Commanders, again, when they play in about 5 weeks, 6 weeks, along with, keeping pace with the Lions, trying to get that one game erased. And it's about the Lions losing to either the Packers, the Niners, or the Vikings, if indeed the Lions are going to lose some games. So this should be a really, really interesting final 6-7 weeks here of the season, and how they're going to align. I mean, week after week, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at these games back to back. Who are the Lions playing? Who are the Eagles playing? Is this team going to win? Is this team going to win? Is this team going to lose? Is that team going to win? To try to jockey and see if the Eagles can indeed get the number one seed. I don't want to leave any other team out. I suppose if Minnesota gets hot and they can beat the Lions, they're only a game behind, but I don't really trust the Vikings to be able to do that and not have a slip-up game. The Packers are 2 games behind the Lions. They're certainly talented and capable. We'll talk about them in this show, but I don't know if they can erase 2 games too, and they've already lost a game to the Lions. So to me, it's either going to be the Eagles or the Lions for the number one seed. And while they both have 8 wins right now, and I'm assuming after this weekend the Lions will have 9, it's going to be a little bit tough sledding given the schedules for both these teams. It's going to be tough sledding for the Eagles to have a 1-game lead on the Lions when all said and done. And then maybe it comes down to tiebreakers, and then maybe other things, then it's not conference, it's not head to head. Maybe conference is tied to, and then you go down the line, common opponent. So it'll be really fascinating. It's too early to start doing that stuff when you know that there are still several weeks. I mean, more than a month left to play in the regular season. But it will be fascinating as we go through November and December. The bye week this week, Giants are off. The Cardinals, the Red Hot Cardinals are off. The Panthers are off. The Bucks are off. This is a huge off week for the Giants. I'm going to go ahead and say that Daniel Jones has probably played his last snap as a Giants quarterback. I would imagine that they will go to Drew Lock. And from what I understand, I think there's guaranteed money for injury in Daniel Jones's contract. And if they want to move on from Daniel Jones, the last thing they want is to have to owe him money just because he got injured in a game, in November or December where the Giants are way out of it. So even if Drew Lock starts and then gets hurt, you'd wonder if he's even the backup. Daniel Jones. You've seen situations like this before where the guy becomes inactive because they don't want to get him hurt and owe him that money. The Bucks, this is a great week for the Bucks to have a bye. They're 4-6, but they're not out of it. I think they're a good team. And offensively, they've performed a lot better than I thought they would after Chris Godwin went out for the year and the fact that they haven't had Mike Evans. Mayfield has shown he can be a successful starter in this league. I think Liam Cohen has done a great job in his first year as their offensive coordinator. They had a brutal stretch against the Ravens, Falcons, Chiefs, and 49ers. That's tough. And they did not do well. So listen, they didn't win the game. So I'm not telling you they're great, but they got the bye. They'll get healthier. They do have some real gifts coming up in their schedule coming out of the bye. Giants, Panthers, and Raiders. So at 4-6, it looks pretty tough right now. 2 games behind the Falcons in the division, but they could easily in 4 weeks from now be 7-6. All right. And the Falcons, who are 6-4, they've got the Broncos, Chargers, and Vikings. They could lose any of those games. They could win. They could lose all of those games. They could win all of those games. That's the kind of team the Falcons are. We'll talk about them. They're a little bit unreliable, so it wouldn't surprise me if the Falcons didn't do well in this stretch against these 3 teams and gave the Bucks an opportunity to get back into the NFC South race. I don't think the Bucks are out of it. I really don't. It's going to come down to the wire. It's going to be an exciting finish for those 2 teams. All right, let's get to the 1 o'clock games. You got the Packers. They're 6.5-point favorites on the road against the Bears. The Packers are 6-3, coming off the bye. They went into the bye. They lost to the Lions 24-14. They were down 24-3 at one point, despite the fact that if you look at the box score statistically, they were outplaying the Lions in almost every category. But this will be a good opportunity for the Packers to rest up, get healthy. I know Jordan Love has been banged up for a lot of the year. And then they're going to play a team, the Bears, who at one point looked like they were really starting to put things together about 3-4 weeks ago. But they've lost 3 straight, and Bears head coach Matt Eberflus does what all head coaches do when their jobs are on the line and there are expectations. You fire an underling. Of course, he fires the offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, out, Thomas Brown in. Not sure why they think Thomas Brown is going to do anything better for this Bears offense. I mean, the Bears have been plagued by offensive line injuries, and that's impacted their ability to have a functional running game and just play functionally on offense like they were for a couple of weeks. And that, of course, has made Caleb Williams regress to the point where, there are just throws that are there that Caleb Williams is not pulling the trigger on. He's really regressed. They haven't figured out a way to get Rome Odunze more involved. And so now you have a new offensive coordinator, and we'll see if that can do anything for the Bears offense. The Bears have scored 27 points total in their last 3 games. Their offensive line's beat up. This really smacks of the Packers being able to come in and start a nice little roll for them. And the Bears, of course, have to play the Packers, then the Vikings, then the Lions. 3 Lions on Thanksgiving, 3 straight NFC North games. This could be a sinking ship for the Bears if they do not get Caleb Williams and that offense playing at a higher level. The Bears have been carried by their defense. They lose Jaquan Brisker. He's out with a concussion. So he's a big piece of their puzzle. Doesn't look good for the Bears right now. Not good at all. Jags at Lions. Well, we talked about this. The Lions are 13-point favorites. That's a big number, but deservedly. I mean, the Jaguars stink. They are starting Mac Jones again as Trevor Lawrence is hurt. I feel like Doug Peterson's trying to get fired. I mean, he says some things in the press conferences lately that make you scratch your head. He was asked about a certain play that I guess didn't go right for the Jags, and he basically told the media corps, well, he's not going to get into that play because they wouldn't understand it anyway. Oh my God. Can you imagine if he was said that and if he was still in the Philadelphia market as opposed to the Jacksonville market? Would not be good for Dougie P. I think he knows he's out of there and he's just going through the motions. I mean, they should have won that game against the Vikings last week. They had the lead for most of it. Sam Darnold was turning the ball over left and right, but they cannot close out a game. Meanwhile, the Lions made a mockery of me because after the Eagles beat the Cowboys in the postgame show with that I do with Adam on Inside the Birds, I said, Dallas turned the ball over 5 times. They had turned the ball over 5 times the week before. You can't expect to turn the ball over 5 times and win a football game. So what do the Lions do that night? Well, they say, "Hold my beer, Moshe," and they go out and they turn the ball over 5 times, 5 interceptions by Jared Goff, and they win and they beat Houston. Not a terrible team. Houston's struggling, but I don't know if any other team in the NFL is good enough to be able to survive 5 turnovers in a game. Laporta's a little banged up, so his status might be in doubt for this game, but I don't think the win will be in doubt for the Lions. Vikings 6-point favorites on the road in Tennessee. Vikings are 7-2. I do think Sam Darnold will settle down. He's got 5 interceptions in the last 2 games. He's thrown an interception in 5 of the last 6 games. Look, we know this is what Sam Darnold is. We know he is the type of quarterback who takes risks, takes chances, who makes bad throws. I get it. This time around, he's got great weapons. He's got Justin Jefferson. He's got Aaron Jones. He's got a great play caller in Kevin O'Connell. Jalen Nailor's doing well. They've got Jordan Addison. Hawkinson's back. So he's probably going to air it out and maybe make some throws that he wouldn't or another quarterback would not want to make. But he does have to settle down. I do think Kevin O'Connell will figure that out with him. I'm not saying Sam Darnold's going to be perfect. I'm not saying he's never going to throw an interception or fumble. I'm saying I think they'll get him playing a little bit better. And even though the Titans have had some good defensive games, the Titans stink and they're going nowhere. So this is a good opportunity for Minnesota to get to 8-2 and to continue to put pressure on the Lions in the NFC North and to push for that number 1 seed themselves. They started off 5-0. They have played good football. Brian Flores has done an excellent job with the Vikings defense. They have to feel pretty confident, and they got to like the fact that they get the Titans this week. Titans actually got a turnover-free game last week from Will Levis. Hallelujah. But they still lost because they're not a very good football team. They lost to the Chargers by 10, even though they didn't turn the ball over, and the Chargers are not world beaters. So that just shows you where the Titans are at right now. Raiders at Dolphins, and the Dolphins are 8-point favorites at home. Yes, a 3-6 team is an 8-point favorite at home. You know what? The Dolphins still think that their season is alive, and you've heard them. You heard them talk after that win against the Rams on Monday night in LA that they're back. That don't count them out. They're in it, and you might not buy it, but technically, they're right. They're not out of it. They are 2 games out of a 7th seed, and in the AFC, the 7th seed and the 6th seed as well is just going to be this carousel between the Chargers, the Broncos, the Colts. And if the Dolphins can win some more games, they can etch their name into it too. The Bengals. There's plenty of football left to play. Miami's defense played really well against the Rams. Tyreek Hill finally got a touchdown. We know he's playing with a wrist injury. He looked better. Tua has looked better since he's come back. A-Chain running the ball well. And like I said, the defense played really well against that Rams offense. Can the Dolphins go on a run? Well, they've got the Raiders this week. They have the Patriots next week. So they're 3-6. It's feasible to see them get to 5-6. All right. 5-6 after 12 weeks of football, you're going to look at 5-6 and say, hey, I'm only maybe a game, maybe 2 games out of the 7th seed. That's when their schedule starts to get a little rougher. After 5-6, if they get to 5-6, they'll have Packers, Jets, Texans, 49ers. They're going to have to play some really good football. The Jets game is the obvious one that stands out as not too tough, but it's an AFC East game. It's a divisional rivalry. Those two teams can't stand each other either. So it's always going to be it's usually a good game between them. They're going to have to win a bunch of those games to really get themselves into that sixth or seventh seed discussion. It does help, though, if they can do that, that they end the year back to back Browns Jets. So if Miami can get to 5-6 and then win a couple of those games that we just mentioned, I can see the Dolphins being a sneaky threat to get that seventh seed. And that would be, listen, I got no horse in the race, but watching Tua go through his injury and I like how Mike McDaniel has coached that team. I like watching their offense when it's at full strength. They need to play better defensively like they did against the Rams, which they can do. Just listen, I'm just enjoying the fact that the AFC 6 and 7 seed race can come down to about 5 or 6 different teams. Rams 4.5-point favorites in New England. New England has played everybody, mostly everybody, pretty tough this year. And the Rams are a little bit disappointing to me, I suppose, even though they kind of got themselves back and got themselves healthier. But you look at the Patriots, and they've won 2 out of their last 3. They lost to the Titans by 3. They lost to the Dolphins earlier in the year by 5. They lost to the Seahawks by 3. They beat the Bengals 16-10. I mean, this is not a good team, the Patriots, and they're still really missing Christian Barmore, their really good interior defensive tackle. He's back at practice. He's missed every game. He had the blood clot issue, which is always scary. I don't think he's going to play against the Rams. Maybe he comes back week 12 against the Dolphins. But this is a game the Rams should win if they were more dependable. I think they'll win. They've won 3 out of 4. Maybe the loss to the Dolphins was a little bit just of on a sidetrack, but I'm a little surprised that Stafford hasn't played a little bit better, especially with Kupp and with Nakua back. I thought he was about to go on a real roll. He's been inconsistent, but everybody's in it in this NFC West race here. Nobody's out of it, all 4 teams. So if the Rams want to stay in it, they got to beat the Patriots. Got to go on the road, get this win. Browns at the Saints. The Saints are 1-point favorites. I mean, this is a game between 2 teams that, they're going to be on new quarterbacks next year. The Saints, they got their customary rejuvenation that you always see a team get when it fires a head coach and has an interim new head coach. And I told you last week, the team likes Darren Rizzi. The league thinks that he's one of the most respected special teams coordinators and young coaches on the rise in the league. So the players will play hard for him. They like him. He's a likable guy, Darren Rizzi. He's an important guy in the league. Does a lot of work in the offseason on, I believe, the competition committee, I think it is, with special teams. So they'll play for him. But they're out of it. The Saints are out of it. The Browns are out of it. They're going to be looking for teams in April. The one thing you wonder about is can Rizzi, can he get the head coaching job for the Saints if he can get the Saints to look more respectable? They're 3-7 now. After this game against, can they beat the Browns and get to 4-7? And then you've got the Rams, Giants, Commanders, Packers, Raiders, and Bucks. Can you beat a couple of those teams? Can you beat the Browns? Can you beat the Browns this week and then maybe beat the Giants in a few weeks? Can you beat the Raiders? Can you give the Bucks a good game just like you did by beating the Falcons last week? I don't know. Can he go 3-4 in that stretch? It would certainly be an improvement. And do I think I wouldn't call him the lead horse in the race to be the next full-time head coach of the Saints, but I think maybe he can give himself a good shot at it. We'll see. The Colts are 4-point favorites at the Jets. So I've been talking on this show all year long about the difficulty that coaches like Shane Steichen face when they're trying to develop a young quarterback, but they have a good enough roster to make the playoffs and they have a better backup quarterback, or at least a backup quarterback they feel like they have a better chance to win with. And the key is to sort of avoid that temptation to see the short-term victory over the long-term victory. The short-term victory is, let's start Joe Flacco. Let's try to win some games. Let's try to get into the playoffs. Let's hope our young quarterback can learn something, but you know that you're not winning the Super Bowl. You're just really doing it because you're in your second year here as Shane Steichen. You have expectations, and your young quarterback is doing terribly, and that looks bad on you as a quarterback developer. So now you're trying to save face a little bit, which is always, always, always the wrong move. But I understand it because sometimes owners get very impatient, and we all know that Jim Irsay is not the model of patience in the NFL. He's a strange cat as an owner. I wonder, I do wonder if Irsay pulled him aside sometime in the last week and said, Shane, go with Anthony. Don't worry about your job status. I understand the difficulties that you're facing here. Not going to judge you on what you do this year, but we have to develop Anthony Richardson better. And it helps that Flacco wasn't playing very well, so it's easy to go back now to Anthony Richardson. But there was never any long-term benefit to starting Joe Flacco. And there really wasn't much of a short-term benefit outside of 1 week or 2 weeks and, trying to get a win that might make the difference in getting you a 6th or a 7th seed. Um, there really wasn't because you just knew you weren't winning the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. So it makes sense to get Anthony Richardson there. You hope with the time off that he's learned something. They're playing a Jets team that's not worth talking about because the Jets ended their season last week when they were humiliated by the Arizona Cardinals. They signed their own death certificate. Now you put Anthony Richardson in. Hopefully, if you're the Colts, you're hoping to use this as a building block game. You hope to get a win and go on. And really, to me, it's about the development of Anthony Richardson, who has no doubt about it, looked terrible this year. But you're not going anywhere anyway. All right. You're not going anywhere unless he looks better. So get him in there, work on him in practice, and see if the 2 weeks off, or if that's what it was, even helped, and try to get yourself back on track while you develop your young quarterback. Ravens and Steelers. Always a great, great game. Ravens and Steelers. Ravens are 3-point favorites in Pittsburgh, which they should be. They're the better team. They're 7-3. There's no doubt the Ravens are a better team. And on a neutral field, I think the Ravens could win this game by 7 to 10 points, if not more. But it's not a neutral field. It's at Heinz Field. And the Steelers are a very good defensive team. And even though they can't probably match the Ravens 53 for 53, the Steelers defense is better than the Ravens defense. And the Steelers offense has been able to function with Russell Wilson and George Pickens. Way better than I thought and better than a lot of other people thought. And I don't even know that Wilson is playing any differently or any better than what he was showing the last few years. He's throwing the moon ball. Now he's got guys who can go out and catch it. I still don't see him making a ton of throws over the middle or being a surgeon. He's playing the way he played for most of his career, which is throw the deep ball, have guys who can get it, like Mike Williams, of course, like Pickens, and then every once in a while, run the ball off structure, and then run the ball, of course, with your running back and the offensive line that's getting healthier and better, especially on the interior. You have to give Mike Tomlin credit. He's done arguably his best coaching job this year with this Steelers team. I feel like we say that every year, which goes to show you how good Mike Tomlin is. This team, this Steelers team, reminds me of the early Bill Cowher teams that ran the ball, played great defense. When they had Cordell Stewart in there, they would ask Cordell to make 5 or 6 plays with his strong arm down the field. Russell Wilson doesn't have a strong arm, but he makes that moonball throw. They would get some off-structure plays from Cordell, but they would really lean on their defense and their running game and ball control offense. And that's what this Steelers team has been doing lately. It's good enough to win games. It's good enough to get them into the playoffs. But like I said about those pre-Ben Roethlisberger teams, I'm not sure it's going to be good enough to win the Steelers playoff games or a Super Bowl. And I don't think that they're better than the Ravens, but they seem to beat the Ravens every year at least once. So it wouldn't shock me if the Steelers won this game, even though I think the Ravens are clearly the better team. Lamar has been amazing. 24 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 124 passer rating. I think I said this a few weeks ago. Lamar, who's won two MVPs already, is including last year, is actually playing better this year, year two of the Todd Monken offense, than he did last year when he was MVP. This dude is on his way to a third straight MVP. And when you watch him play, he is doing an excellent job of finding receivers everywhere. It's Isaiah Likely one week. It's Mark Andrews being resurrected another week. It's Zay Flowers. They had a guy Wallace, Traven Wallace, come up big for them in a game. And if Deontay Johnson starts to really get incorporated into this Ravens offense, as good as he is, and I think Deontay Johnson is an underrated. I think he's really, really good. If you can put him on the field 60% of the time alongside Zay Flowers and with those tight ends, whew, and with the way Lamar is playing, the Ravens will be tougher and tougher. But they got to get through this game. It would be nice if the Ravens could show that they could beat the Steelers twice in the season. We'll see. But Lamar right now is a superhuman, and that's why I think the Ravens are better. But history says that this game in Pittsburgh will be tough for them. All right, 4 o'clock games. You got the Falcons at the Broncos. Broncos are 2.5-point favorites. You know, the Falcons are, it's got to be frustrating to be a Falcons fan. They're a good team. They can compete with anyone, but they're not dependable. They're not reliable. They can lose games that you think that they should win and win easily. You know, they lost to the Seahawks at home a couple of weeks ago by a lot. I get it. New Orleans, you go in, that's always a tough divisional game for them. And New Orleans has the new head coach and they're galvanized by that. But they outplayed the Saints and still lost. So I can't rubber stamp them going into Denver against a very good Broncos defense. It's always tough to win in Denver with the mile high conditions there. Bo Nix is getting better. I've said it all year long. Bo Nix will get better and better week after week in Sean Payton's offense. That has happened. Broncos are getting a boost in their running game. They got one from Audric Estime last week. I don't know if I pronounced his name right, but they've struggled to really find that one ball carrier between Estime, between Javonte Williams, between McLaughlin. I mean, they got a different guy seemingly every 2 or 3 weeks, but the constant is Nix is developing. You have a very good wide receiver in Courtland Sutton. Every once in a while, somebody as a number 2 receiver steps up for them. They had Villy do it last week. They should have beat the Chiefs. They had the Chiefs on the ropes, but they get a field goal block and they lose. I think that they can beat the Falcons. I think the Falcons can win the game. The problem with the Falcons is they can't rush the passer. They don't have enough pass rush, and Nix I think Nick surprises people with his ability to get out of the pocket and make plays on the run, make plays off structure. He may not have to do it much because the Falcons don't have a great pass rush, but he can just, in general, use his athleticism to get first downs. So you kind of like Denver here. I saw Darnell Mooney popped up on the injury report for the Falcons with an Achilles on Thursday. That is not something you normally see someone pop up on an injury report with. So keep that one in mind. Watch it. Hopefully it's not a bad injury for Darnell Mooney, who has been a big part of the Falcons offense this year. Seahawks are at the 49ers. 49ers are 6.5-point favorites. Now the Seahawks come out of the bye. They lost 2 straight games going into the bye. They're 4-5. They do get, I think they're expecting to get DK Metcalf back, so that'll be a nice little boon to them. I still hope they figure out a way to get the ball to Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's done a nice job in, at least individually with Metcalf out, but they've got to balance the offense. They have to be able to get the ball to both of those guys, Metcalf and Jigba, run the ball well with Kenneth Williams. They're just a very inconsistent team, and I get a feeling they're hitting the 49ers, who they've already lost to at home in Seattle. They lost to them. I get a feeling they're getting the 49ers at a bad time. I've said all along since my week 1 preview, I thought the 49ers were going to have a Super Bowl loss hangover. That they weren't as deep defensively, that they had some injuries that couldn't be ignored. And I was right. They did not start off the season well. I think they're about to hit their stride. They are 5-4 after their win last week. They've got Christian McCaffrey back, which is huge for them. I mean, you're talking about maybe, the best running back or best overall offensive player in the NFC They've won two straight. Beating the Buccaneers there was a good win for them. That was in Tampa. I believe it was in Tampa. Yep, in Tampa. And I think they're about to hit their stride. They've won four of six. They're getting good production in the absence of Brandon Ayuk from Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. And you're seeing Brock Purdy play well. Now Kittle's a little bit banged up. We'll see what happens there. But I think the Niners are about to start to become what we've seen of the Niners for the last few years. I think they're going to start scoring some points, playing some good defense. Now, after this game against the Seahawks, if they win and get to 6-4, you'll feel good. But right after that, they have Green Bay and Buffalo. So kind of makes this game really important for them. Chiefs at Bills. That's the game that obviously everybody has got their eyes on. First of all, the Bills are 2.5 point favorites. When was the last time a 9-0 team was an underdog, even on the road? That's pretty interesting. As if Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs needed any more motivation. They are underdogs headed into this game. The Chiefs are the type of team, as they've shown here, that they're so experienced, they're so poised. They get luck. They certainly get the calls from the refs. That's what you get when you're three-time champs. But you almost have to beat them twice. You have to play nearly a perfect game against them, and then you also need to get the bounce of the football. Denver didn't. Denver played great defense, did what they had to do, should have won the game, got their kick blocked at the end of the game. So the Bills have a better offense than the Broncos. They're home. They've been playing very good ball. They have a very good chance to win this game. I understand why the odds makers see them at 2.5 point favorites. They're getting Amari Cooper back, I believe, from a wrist injury, which will offset some of the injuries they've got to Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid. I can see the Bills winning this game, but they will have to play perfectly to do it. I mentioned last week, Josh Allen had only thrown 2 interceptions all year. He threw 2 interceptions in the game last week. Now they still won, so you give them the credit. They won 30-20 over the Colts, but it's just something to watch. He played basically turnover-free football for the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season, and now you've seen four in the last 2 games, 2 in the last game. Chiefs won't have Butker. That could be a big loss. Knee injury for him. Obviously, if it comes down to a field goal kick, you wonder about that. And Pacheco not yet ready, I don't think, to come back. He'll probably be back the week after. And we'll see. They'll need some big plays from their receivers in this game. They haven't gotten a lot of production from Xavier Worthy. The type of production you thought they would get when they drafted him in the first round. Then he had a big week 1. I think he had 2 touchdowns. Right, Hopkins, he had a good game a couple weeks ago. Not such a great game against the Broncos. He, got into it with Surtain a little bit there. So we'll see how he does against the Bills. The Chiefs will need him. If the Chiefs win this game and go to 10-0, you might start to hear from some of those 72 Dolphins who always like to boast and brag about their undefeated season. They took great delight in the Patriots that went 16-0 in 2007, losing in the Super Bowl, because the Dolphins are still the only team to go perfect regular season, perfect playoffs, win the Super Bowl undefeated. But they'll start to have the Chiefs on their radar if the Chiefs get to 10-0. And if they do, you look at their schedule after this game against the Bills, and Panthers, Raiders, Chargers, Browns over the next 4. All right. It's not exactly murderer's row there. I get it. Chargers is a division game. I think they're still better. But if they get to 10-0, it's the same thing with the Raiders division game, but we know the Raiders aren't very good. We know the Panthers aren't good. If they get to 10-0, you almost feel like 14-0 is going to be real legit. And then it's going to be a really interesting end of December for the Chiefs if they get to 14-0. Sunday night game. I love this Sunday night game. Bengals at Chargers. This is a game that the Bengals absolutely must win if they want to get into the playoffs. They are 4-6, but as I mentioned with the Dolphins, you are not out of it at 4-6 in the AFC for a 6 or a 7 seed. Right now, they're only a game the Bengals are out of the seventh seed. The Chargers, who are 6-3, would be the sixth seed right now. Denver would be I think the seventh. The Colts are hanging around there. It's going to be a five-team race for those two last two seeds, and the tiebreakers are probably going to come into play. So this would be a big win for the Bengals if they can get it over the Chargers, because the Chargers, while they're playing well, and Justin Herbert has played really good football. Quietly has played very good football. He's almost had to be the entire offense for the Chargers, because the Chargers don't have a whole lot of playmakers. They have a very good running game, and Dobbins is held up, and that's great. And every once in a while, you'll see Lad McConkey have maybe a 100-yard game or a touchdown. Every once in a while, you'll see Quentin Johnson catch a touchdown, but they don't really have an explosive or a dynamic offense. And they haven't really beaten anybody. Their last three, they've won three straight, but they've beaten the Saints, the Browns, and the Titans. I think the Bengals will present a challenge to them. The Bengals will stress their defense, which has been very good, the Chargers defense, but the Bengals will stress it more than most of the teams that they've played so far. So we'll really get to know if these Chargers are for real, not only with this Bengals game, but after that, they've got Ravens, Falcons, Chiefs, Bucks, and Broncos. Okay? You're 6-3, staring down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pretty tough opponents here. So if you're the Bengals and you're 4-6 and you win this game and get to 5-6 and you make the Chargers 6-4, you can see a path to the Chargers suddenly being 6-6 in a few weeks, then maybe 6-7, or 7-6. But if you're the Bengals and you piece together some wins, you're going to start to whittle down that deficit right now that they have for the 6th or the 7th seed. I don't count the Bengals out. I think Joe Burrow's playing at a really high level, and of course Jamar Chase is. Their defense isn't great. I wouldn't, I'm not saying I think the Bengals are going to win the Super Bowl. I'm just simply talking about getting into the playoffs, and I think the Bengals will have a shot if they win this game. If they don't, I think you can probably sign their death certificate. The Monday night game, Texans 7.5-point favorite over the Cowboys. Let's be honest, the game should be over at halftime. I mean, even with Houston's recent struggles, they're 6-4. Yes, they are struggling. Offensive line is not playing well. Laramie Tunsil, surprisingly, not playing well, and you've seen that. The Texans, they're just not the same team. They're struggling, and they got to get it back together. Obviously, the Cowboys present a great opportunity for them to do that. The Texans have lost 2 straight. They lost to the Jets. They've lost to the Lions. I mean, they lost to the Lions, even though you were gifted 5 turnovers. That's how you know you're not playing well. Any team as good as the Texans are, or at least should be, that gets 5 turnovers should win that game going away. Or at least win, and they lost the game. But this will be a gift for them to play the Cowboys, and then after that, they'll get the Titans and the Jags. So they're 6-4 right now, and not looking great for the Texans. But in 3 weeks, it could easily be 9-4, and maybe that'll get them back on track. But then they'll have the Dolphins, the Chiefs, Ravens in the next 3 weeks. So that'll be a telltale 3 weeks for the Texans to see if they're really back or if they were just beaten up on bad teams. And the Cowboys, they are a bad team right now, and I don't see any hope for them in store. I mean, yeah, they'll get, Deron Bland back. To me, their offensive line is playing terribly. Cooper Rush, obviously not going to be the answer for them. And I don't think the return of Micah Parsons is enough to just make them instantaneously get better and rectify all of their wrongs. All right, my 3 picks of the week against the spread. I had a good week last week. I went 3-0, bringing me back over 500, 16-14 for the year. I had the Bills covering on the road against the Colts by 4. They won by 10. I had the Chargers covering. They were 7.5-point favorites over the Titans. They won by 10. And I had the Vikings covering the 4. They were 4-point favorites in Jacksonville, and they won by 5. So I got the 3-0 last week. This week, I'm going to ride with the Dolphins. I do think they found something. They're at home now. They're playing the Raiders. They're 8-point favorites. It's a big number, but I do think that the Dolphins have a ton to play for, and I think they got their confidence back going on the road and beating the Rams. So I expect them to come home and take it to the Raiders. I'm going to go with the Texans, 7.5 at the Cowboys. I think Nico Collins should probably be back for them, so that might help their offense, even though the offensive line has been really problematic. You get a playmaker like Nico Collins back. You're playing a team that's just dead to the water like the Cowboys. I think they can cover the 7.5. And if you couldn't tell, I like the Bengals on the road against the Chargers, 2.5. The Chargers are road favorites. So I like the Bengals to win. I'm sorry. Let me start that over. The Chargers are home favorites. They are 1.5 point favorites at home over the Bengals. But I like the Bengals to at very least cover, if not win outright, this game against the Chargers. So those are my three picks. And we'll do it again next week. Everybody, have a great week and enjoy your football watching.